They delivered the tea today, so I now want to distribute it to you, for those of you who would like to take some, because I know you don't play with your tea. So, what we'll do, I think the best thing is let everybody take one. Volunteers, can you take one to that column? And then, that's 160, 240, yeah, oh yeah, start. Okay, and then also to inform you that after this panel, you'll be able to go and get a box of Northern Nigerian goodies. I'm sure you've seen them out there, the nice, lovely desserts and sweets that are locally made, and they are absolutely beautiful. So when we're finished with this panel, we'll go there and get that, and that's something to eat. Is this as fast as we can do this? This is the fastest we can go. People, please reach out your hands and collect the tea from him. Abi, just take it, pass it on. Thank you. Because you are late now, no tea for you. Eh? Yes, they transferred it to her. She actually had opened an account. So we just found it. Has everyone got one? Did you get your tea? Mustafa, have you got some more? There's somebody in front who just came in. Maybe we should leave a box by the door so we can start, and then anybody who comes in can just take one. Thank you. If we have many, then they should take two. Is this all that's left?
Yes, I want 5.
Let everybody take one more, I beg. So please, everyone, just take another one. Kayode. Take 2 for yourself. Don't let him cheat you. Babs. Babs. So I can send it to you later. Oh, yeah, go your picture. You know, if it's at her. Do you need more? I don't think you got some. Okay. Shut your tongue. I don't care. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Okay. So we're ready to start the next panel. And Uncle, are you looking for something? Okay. Just to be sure, I'm just asking. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Volunteers, please just help me take the boxes out. Thank you so much. Thank you. So the next panel is one that's very exciting. We have all the way from Cape Town, the University of Cape Town, we have Professor Kolade Arogundade, who's going to be our host. He's the one who's always talking about post-colonialism. So I had to warn him before that, please. Not today. No, of course, you have the freedom. Decolonization. That's true. It's decolonization that you talk about. Yes, yes. And on the panel, I'm actually really excited because this is our last panel discussion for Kabafest. Isn't it? We've kind of just sped through the 4 days, and I'm just so elated. Sweets. Then we take a 30-minute break after this panel. We come back for the poetry. We do the poetry presentation, and after that, we go straight into the concert. Is that okay? Jeremiah Gang is coming back to entertain you. Okay. So, 45 minutes. Break I said we have after this event, we'll just extend it to 45 minutes. Then we do the poetry. After the poetry, we go straight into the concert. I think that makes a lot of sense. So joining my brother here on the panel is somebody that I'm sure you're all familiar with. Lots of write-ups on Sahara reporters. Activism is in his blood. This is somebody who has survived jail. There's nothing you can throw at him on social media. He will return it to you. Please join me in welcoming Kayode Ogundamisi. And of course, I just introduced her, I think 2 panels ago. And anytime we have a panel and we have a discussion, okay, you want to do your own panel? Anytime we have any of our panel discussions, I'm always looking forward to her intervention because it's always just spot on. I've learned so much from her, and it gives me such great privilege to introduce her to you again so that hopefully you will have the same learning experience. She's a big sister to me. She's a big sister and a mentor to so many. Please join me in welcoming Kadaria Ahmed. Can we check the mics, please? Do a quick mic check.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our conversation about moving Nigeria forward. I don't need to introduce anyone anymore. So our program says we have 80 minutes. So I assume we still have 80 minutes, and somebody's going to be. So I am not going to beat around the bush. I'm just going to ask the question, and because it's ladies first, we will ask Auntie Kadaria to start with us. And the broad question is for both of you. How do we move Nigeria forward?
We can't move Nigeria forward until the people of Nigeria decide that the time has come to move Nigeria forward. What do I mean by that? There's a certain unity of purpose that is required for us to get rid of the things that are holding us back, starting with a political class that is largely driven by self-interest, that is largely looking out only for itself and its immediate family. I am a bit evangelical about a conversation that I keep having on Twitter, on social media, with everybody who cares to listen, about the divisions that have been sowed among Nigerians on the basis of tribe and religion. I think these 2 things have done the biggest damage to our ability to unite and confront the failure that we see in governance and the impact of that failure on institutions and et cetera, et cetera. So it sounds almost pedestrian when you explain it, but it is actually quite profound because it has an impact. So at a sort of general level, we all know this. when politicians are sitting down and doing deals late in the night in Abuja at 12 o'clock, giving each other contracts, employing their children and putting them in lucrative jobs, trust me, they don't sit down and do it on the basis of you are Yoruba, you are Hausa, and you are Fulani. It's about a class of people. Somehow, as soon as we start talking about holding people accountable, they are able to find people who will start saying, is it because he's from the Niger Delta? Is it because he's Hausa Fulani? Is it because he's Yoruba? And for me, this has been, in my view, the biggest obstacle to the unity that is required by the common man so that we can actually hold people in positions of authority accountable.
Thank you. So Kadaria has spoken to citizenship. So what I'd like you to do is move that conversation forward. Are we ready to move Nigeria forward?
Thanks very much. Hey, hello, Kaduna. Kaduna is like home for me. I schooled in Unijos, and in those days when the military thought Nigeria was their play area, Kaduna played a huge role within NANS, where we come to ash all the plots to kick the military out of power. so, because when you say move it forward, it means it's actually moving, but it's not moving. So, kickstart, you know. And I'm going to I always use my experience in the country because it's a privilege to come from this part of Africa. I've been privileged to go to get my university education in this country, and I got the most important education in Jos Prison as a student activist, and it's a big privilege. And I just want to use an example. I don't know the number of people that have traveled abroad in this room, but if that plane arrives in Muritala Mohammed Airport or Abuja Airport, just imagine everyone is rushing to immigration. And as soon as you get out of the plane and you approach the Avio Bridge, Nigerians will start complaining, now wow, this country, eh? You know, we start complaining, we start agonizing, we start getting angry. And then we get to the immigration, the conveyor belt is not working, and we're still complaining. But I had a very peculiar experience last year. I landed Muritala Mohammed Airport, and I saw something wrong in Lagos Airport, and I wasn't happy about it. And I came back the next day. I went to the MD of FAN. I barged my way in and said, look, why don't you do it this way? Maybe it would work on the arrival area. And to my greatest surprise, you know, almost 2 weeks later, it was done. And when I came out the other day on Saturday, it worked. That was a step in moving Nigeria forward, you know. We appropriate the fact that our country is stagnant. No, it's not stagnant. Nigerians, this is where I would disagree with Kadaria because we always agree to disagree most times. And it's unfair for Lola to actually put us together. So, you see, Nigerians are already kickstarting Nigeria. If you go to our rural areas, and if you go to somewhere, the poor areas, the Nigerian is the minister of finance in his house, is the minister of power because he has his own generator, is the minister of defense because he has a local OPC man or the Jambia to protect himself, is the minister in all segments because the state does not exist within his space. So it shows that Nigerians themselves are already in the process of moving the country. But what is not happening is people in leadership joining hands with the people of the country to move the country forward. And where we need to do is to connect the resilience of our people, the can-do attitude of our people, the ability for a people pushed to the wall in the minds of our people is what leadership needs to key into, and then our potentials will be unleashed, and then we'll discover that what we're seeing now is just a temporary missteps that could get better.
If I could just quickly say, there's no doubt that Nigerians are resilient, that we are creative, we are hardworking. It is at odds with the docility that we display when it comes to holding our leaders accountable. And that's the point I am trying to make. It is not that Nigerians are not in their own way doing the things that they need to do to survive. In fact, we're very creative in circumventing the failures that governance has imposed on us and the people. And it is, I think, a testimony to how good we are as a people and how hardworking, how resilient that our society continues to function. My problem is that that ingenuity, that creativity somehow gets lost when we start talking politics. Suddenly, the Igbo man that is happy to open his shop in Kaduna and Aba and Lagos and trade all over, or the Hausa man who carries his goods to Lagos, goes to Lagos to buy things or whatever, you start talking politics and suddenly he goes back into a shell of, I am Northern, I am Southern, I am Hausa, that man is Igbo, and he has to, you understand what I'm saying? And for me, I think this is the legacy of politicians playing politics with both religion and with tribe over a long period of time. My frustration lies in the fact that as smart as we are, we seem unable to see through this and actually call their bullshit. You know, this is really, for me, why I get really, really frustrated.
I think, I don't mean to make the moderator an onlooker in this debate now. but the facts of the matter is that Nigerians have always made efforts to move the country forward in different ways. There's a man called Isaac Adakaboro in the Niger Delta, who saw that the injustice in the system was not working for his people in the Niger Delta, and he took up arms against the state. If you all know about the 7-day revolution in the Niger Delta. And then over time, you all know about our brothers, the militants in the creeks, who thought there was no point in negotiating with the federal government, and they defined a way of creating attention, and they took up arms against the state. Then, of course, I would indict myself here. There was the OPC. I was the founding secretary general. We thought, look, the national question needs to be addressed. And I live in the UK now, so I have to be careful. We use legitimate means to draw attention to our situation. And you can reel out. And of course, the gentleman from the southeast, Nnamdi Kanu, who thought it wise to also draw attention. But the question is, it is not that we don't have those people. We don't have a well-defined solution as to how we want to move forward. All those people you mentioned, in the Niger Delta now, the militants are the billionaires. In the Southwest, my contemporary, who we were the OPC together, the Ààrẹ Ọ̀nà Kakanfò, Gani Adams, you can't ask him to come and go into the bush because he has a fixed address now, you know? So the poor of our society must rediscover the strength they have, you know, and question everyone that speaks for them. Because what we tend to do is to speak for the poor, but not speak with them or find out what they really want, you know. And to be frank, there are also other people who do it differently. I'm tired of agonizing. I'm going to go back to Nigeria and I'm going to take part in politics. And today, and I just looked at him like, what are you talking about? And actually, I can say it now. Today is the governor of Kaduna State. And is being able, because he's in the government, he's in the system, no matter what you think about it, it identifies Kabafest as something that is needed by his people. So that's what I call the philosophy of entryism, where you will go into the system and try to make a change. That is one option. The other option, which is the most radical option, I always say to people in Nigeria, and that's why I disagree with a lot of people, the young people, is that what I find in modern activism is that activism is not for you to change the society. Activism is to replace the ruling oppressive elite, and you become the new ruling oppressive elite. So we have to change our mindset, especially with the young people. So it's not a shame, it's not a coincidence that people say we want to, not too young to run. And then you say not too young to run, and you join a political party where the rules are made by the oppressors, and you want them to bend the rules to satisfy you. It's not going to happen. So there is a need for us to be creative in our activism. And I just hope, and I agree, Kadaria, with what you're saying about how difficult it is to move this country forward. But I also want us not to lose. I'm one of the people that gets angry about Nigeria. But I want us to recognize that there are few steps that we've made, there are few progress that we're making. And we should not blind ourselves, we should not be blinded by the fact that things are bad and not recognize the progress that we're making as a country.
Thank you. So one of the things that Kadaria spoke about is citizenship and class versus tribe. And one of the questions that we've not really answered in this country, in my own opinion, is whether we want to remain a nation. I spoke about Boko Haram as being a decolonization movement that went wrong. And I also have my opinions about Nnamdi Kanu's movement. A lot of people said how he went about it was wrong. And I beg to differ. I think that he needed to make a spectacle, insult everybody, say what he needed to say to get the attention that he needed to get. Now, my question to you, Kadaria, do you think that the component, and I don't like using the word tribe, the component ethnic nationalities of Nigeria, are they resolved to be in the nation state Nigeria? Do you think that we have agreed that we are even Nigerians? I speak to my father. I'm convinced he will not agree with me. I'm convinced my father is first Ekiti before he's Yoruba.
I think the national question, which is sort of what you referred to, is a question that has preoccupied Nigeria for the last 50 years or so. And even when people in these days talk about restructuring, at the heart of restructuring is the question of self-determination, the ability of a people, to decide the direction of their lives. Now, the colonialists brought a mishmash of people together, no doubt about it, and didn't ask us. And I remember I traveled to places like Niger and Mali, and there's no doubt that they look much more like parts of northern Nigeria than places like Lagos. So there are differences. Now the issue is we are this entity now called Nigeria. And what I've always said is determining whether to stay together or to have a loose relationship or even to go our separate ways can only happen if there's a unity of purpose. So again, it's about reaching a consensus among ourselves, about having a conversation that then determines where to go. But we keep allowing, so we've had national conferences, for example, where recommendations have been made, and yet people don't respect those because, another government will come and it's not binding on them. And part of the reason that happens is that the people who have these conversations are not really representative of the ordinary man. They are selected, by people in power. So who says that when they say that this is the position they've taken, they're speaking for their people? So we must find a workable way in which we can agree that, okay, if whatever it is we want to do, can we agree that this is how we're going to do it? And I'm suggesting, again, that lack of unity is hurting us in many ways, including in providing the opportunity for us to have these very critical conversations.
So we've been talking about the Sovereign National Conference, which I'm sure that you've been very vocal in your own personal. What is stopping us from having a sovereign national conference in which we can then decide which way forward as a beginning of whatever it is, as the formation of a nation state?
I'm going to be very frank here, and please don't. You can take this in whatever way you want to take it, but it's important. Look, the fact is, Nigeria as a country is a mirage. Let us start from that point of view. That Nigeria is created, or was created, right, modeled by the British colonialist powers, and not recognizing the rights of the ethnic nationalities. You said a while ago you don't want to use tribe, but I use tribe in a very proud way, not in the negative connotation of the British or the Western powers. That we need to recognize the diversity in our country. We need to recognize that it is those ethnic nationalities who formed our nation. That before Nigeria, my people in Ikare would trade from Ikare all the way to Nigeria. They would take their cocoa and get kola nut. There were trading relationships between these nations. Oyo State had a kingdom, a republic that was much advanced than the British parliamentary system. That there were checks and balances between the Alaafin of Oyo and the whatever. And in the north, there are different kingdoms. That if Nigeria were to be in Europe, you would have multiple countries in Nigeria today because our development, our interaction was interrupted by colonialism. So we were not able to develop those independent states. Now, when they came in and interrupted our progress, and they just sat in Berlin and drew up this one and that one together, and we find ourselves as Nigeria. We ourselves, we've not taken a conscious decision to redefine our country as a nation where we are all proud of, where we can all feel the same. In Kaduna today, the governor will be accused of bringing people from outside Kaduna to come and work in Kaduna. In Lagos State, people are asking why should an Igbo man be commissioner for budget and planning in almost 16 years? You know, those questions arise because we have not defined to recognize first our diversity, right? That there is nothing wrong in being diverse. There's nothing wrong in being saying I am Birom before Nigeria, or I am Igbo before Nigeria, or I am Yoruba before Nigeria. So long as the recognition of who you are does not mean the supremacy of your tribe over another tribe. That is the important question, because in UK, where I call home now, the Scottish man is a proud Scot. The Irish is a proud Irish person. And the Welsh, the same thing. They keep their language, but they also recognize that it's a united kingdom. You know? So we need not to shy away from it. So if someone say Biafra Republic, I have no problem, absolutely no problem with Biafra Republic. So long you maintain the conversation without attacking my own very existence. And that is why it is important to have those conversations. And I have disagreement with people in this government. We agree on a lot of things. We agree on anti-corruption. We agree on bringing on bringing good governance and what have you. But we do not agree on the fact that they say you cannot discuss the very existence of Nigeria. No, you can discuss it in a free democracy. If you have serious conversations about it, you will defeat those who...
Issue of having a conversation about our existence. I think actually there's a lot of fear-mongering that goes on. And again, it is politicians making people believe that life will be much worse off if these conversations happen and changes happen. So there's a myth that, I mean, I am kind of lucky in many ways because I have one leg in the north and I'm one leg in the south. It's been like that all my life. So I kind of get to sit down and have conversations with people across, you know, the divide. I remember sitting down when I think I did the first exclusive interview with Nnamdi Kanu when he came out of jail. I went to Umuahia. First of all, they were shocked to see me there because his house, you know, was full of, I don't know if you saw some of the pictures I took, people in red, all of that. And I was literally the only northerner in that place. And he was surprised. But I wanted to hear what he had to say, his side of the story about what. And what struck me, the conversations I had outside his house were even more profound than the conversation I had with him. I met a young boy who was the head of the Biafra scientists, you know, young scientists of Biafra, very technical boy who was good with his hands, knew how to put things together. I had built a drone and was proud to show it to me. And I asked him, how did you end up, you know, wanting to be part of Biafra? And his story was this. He finished secondary school, flying colors, WAEC, whatever. And then Abia State Government decided to use him for propaganda. He was on the pages of their local newspapers as having received a full scholarship to read engineering, blah, 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 blah. Then it was time to now go to school. The state government didn't help him get admission. The schools in Abia said he was from Anambra, and so didn't give him admission. Then he tried, I think, the College of Technology in Adamawa. Again, he didn't have a quota. And so essentially what this boy said to me was, Nigeria has no place for me. And so I'm going to find a place, and it looks like Biafra might have a place for me. The point I'm making is that we shouldn't be scared of these conversations. It isn't true that if for any reason we decide to restructure Nigeria, for example, that we will be worse off than we are now. Because the current tensions that we are facing are actually quite damaging, and they're being exploited and exploited actively, which is what I mean by if we can try and first of all see ourselves as people that are looking to better our lives. Then, I disagree with Kayode who says, it's not that I don't want people to be tribalistic, but I want people to understand that you need to cooperate with other tribes. Since you are now, whether you like, we like to say Nigeria is a mirage. Nigeria might not have settled in our hearts and in our souls, but it is a geographical entity. You travel with a Nigerian passport. We spend the naira. We have collective policies that mean we sink or swim together. And to deny that reality, means that we're not able to sit down and be very practical in some of the decisions we need to take as a people.
But the reality, Kadaria, is that the reality you see, the reality you describe is the Twitter generation reality. The conversation that is going on in local communities, the conversations that is going on in our bedrooms. Look, we can be here and be nice about Nigeria is nice and all those things. But what are those conversations we are having?
Does the fact that a Ministry of Health, Federal Ministry of Health, exists and sits in Abuja and makes policy about infant mortality and the drugs to put in hospital have a bearing with the person sitting in Ekiti?
No, we are in agreement with that.
That's the point I'm making, though.
The point I'm trying to make.
No, because you didn't let me finish. So the point I'm making is that if you want to do reform, there are certain things you must recognize as fact, particularly if your reform is not going to take the form of war. It's one thing for you to say, okay, because we're different and Nigeria is a mirage, let's all go our separate ways. We have seen that that is not a workable solution. And the workable solution entails the Ekiti man sitting down with the Zamfara man and deciding, let's agree on whether to live together or to go our separate ways.
Let me now tell you what happens on the streets. In Lagos State that I know, I can speak authoritatively on Lagos State.
Which you used to know, by the way.
I know. I know.
I'm more Lagosian than you now. I live in Lagos.
In Lagos State that I know, well, you live in a part of Lagos where you won't see the real Lagos.
Which part of Lagos do you live?
I live in Alimosho. Alimosho is the highest voting population in Africa. Yes, that's the reality. That is a fact. Alimosho, look, in Lagos State, and I speak, you see, we can color these things, we can romanticize it, or we can be realistic about it. We can agree that the conversations Igbo people have when they meet in their meetings every New Yam Festival is different from the conversations the Hausa community are having and the conversations we are having in the Southwest. But of course, when we meet in platforms, we have romantic conversations of we are now. An Igbo man, right? Listen to a man who established a radio station in Peckham and was able to mobilize hundreds of thousands of people in a very short time on the basis of that the Yorubas are the enemy of the Igbos. Major part of the propaganda. on the basis of the Hausa Fulanis have been our enemies for hundreds of years. The ordinary Igbo man who is listening to that man is not buying this conversation you're telling us about. Nigeria is this. There are some core issues where hatred has been planted amongst our people for a very long period. That narrative, we must address those narratives. If we continue to address those narratives in the local community, we are wasting our time. It is the same narrative that will make Abubakar Shekau convince young Nigerians that blowing yourself up will lead to a Sharia republic. You know, because the reality in those little communities, the realities within a man who 400 naira is a major profit is different from the reality of myself that can fly and come to this country. And what I try to do at every point in time is, while I listen to the Twitter generation, is to go within those communities and listen to the conversations they are having. And you'll be shocked, and this is where our leadership are shocked, that the reality, because of the current injustice across Nigeria, which is class-related, but it's also tribal-related, is the point where an Igbo person living in Kaduna does not feel Kaduna enough. Let me give you an example. When I left university, when I was in University of Jos, I was a nationalist. But even within UniJos, I felt some sense of injustice. Because here was a son of a driver in Lagos. My father, the only time my father could contribute to me in the university was he had to sneak to get his boss's car. Drove all the way to Jos with 4 packs of St. Louis, half bag of Gary, and 100 naira, 20 naira notes. And he said to me, if that Gary will not kill you in 1 year. And in that same university, my contemporary from Plateau State was being paid a bursary of a full civil servant in Plateau State. And I didn't feel a sense of justice in Nigeria. And that is just me. But it's just also the reality where politicians will twist the conversation about somebody is getting 120 to get into Ahmadu Bello University, and somebody has to score 280 for the same course. So we need to link with what the common man on our streets are thinking and key into that. It's only when we key into that conversation that we will know that we have a huge problem where those common men see Nigeria as a mirage. The only time they see Nigeria as one country is maybe when at least Super Eagles are scoring those marvelous goals, or in some cases when they go to a place and they can get 1 or 2 things from the system. And it brings back to the question when you talk about sovereign national conference. And Kadaria did mention that there have been a lot of conferences. I don't agree. We've not had conferences about Nigeria. Every conference is politicized to suit the demands of the ruling president at that point in time. Sovereign national conference means sovereignty belongs to the people. You cannot have restructuring with a National Assembly whose life and soul survivors depend on the system that we have in place now.
I am convinced that I've lost...
You have to allow me to respond.
I will let you. I am convinced that I've lost control of this conversation. But it is going so well that I actually don't need democracy itself as a Western notion. He talked about how the Yoruba people, the Republican nature of Igbo people, and of course, how the Sultanate ran the northern part and even outside of the country. Now, it brings me to my favorite subject and my passion. Do we need then to decolonize our democracy? Because the reality of it is that the voting patterns show that the likelihood of a majority Yoruba party to win, although it's not looking like that in Ekiti and places like that, but the likelihood of a majority Yoruba party to win in Lagos, or a majority Igbo party to win in Enugu, or a majority Fulani or Hausa party to win in Sokoto, he's 90%. And so people do not vote on ideas. People vote on tribal and religious affiliations. And in order to move Nigeria forward, I mean, I went to dinner in a politician's house, and I didn't know she was a politician before I went there, I probably would not have gone. But I've never, I sent her a WhatsApp message afterwards, and I wasn't hitting on her, I was telling the truth, was that you are the most unsolved person that I've met in a long time, outside of Lolalatis and Kadaria. But the reality of it is that today, a politician sat in this place, and what he had to say, and he's in government, was amazingly intelligent and honest. But so I get surprised that there are actually people like that in government, and we are not seeing those signs. There's not, I mean, we heard now that our Minister of Finance has been accused of fraud, and there's no investigation, there's nothing. So do we need then to move away from what happens in Europe, accountability and all of that, to an homebred democracy, an ideology of governance that resonates with who we are? And so the practice of governance in northern Nigeria should not necessarily be what it is like in Lagos or in Enugu. Is there a possibility to begin to think about such things in part of that restructuring as you respond to Kayode, that is?
Okay. Just quickly, I think I started this conversation because I think there's been sort of a little maybe misunderstanding of what I said, and based on Kayode's response. I started this conversation by saying these differences exist, but I think they slow us down and stop us from doing certain things. So it isn't that I don't recognize that in our bedrooms we have these conversations or that these differences are real, but that they've been exploited to such an extent that they've now become the fundamental stumbling block to what we're trying to do. And so, yes, I'm all for narratives that dismantle that and show things to happen. But I'm saying that on a practical level, that dismantling would entail you building a state where people feel they have a stake, which is why I gave the example of the young Biafran boy who felt that Nigeria did not have a place, look at a different way of doing things. I think that train has left the station, to be honest. The ability or the opportunity for us to have a homegrown system of governance that would have, taken into account our peculiarities, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's gone. And I personally, I believe in democracy. I believe in the equality of men and women. I believe in the right of people to self-determine. And I think at the moment, the only system that can guarantee that for me is the one man, one vote system. I don't see any other way. I don't believe in getting someone who is a nice dictator that will now decide, how to do things. I don't believe in that. But within what already exists, my belief is that we need to infiltrate political parties in large numbers. Large enough numbers that we force internal party democracy. Because often we get very caught up in elections fever. Every 4 years, we become agitated. But, that is the tail end of the process. The actual voting is the tail end. By the time we're going to cast our votes, decisions have been taken on who the flag bearers are, who should run for office, et cetera, et cetera. And so we are kind of very limited because our choices really have been narrowed down for us. And what I'd like to see is the involvement of people in politics as a full-time thing, where you go register for political parties, take part in meetings, take part at the grassroots, and begin to actually hold people to account. Because that's the only way. And then pay your money, pay your dues. Let's start funding political parties so that we don't have the big man syndrome, where you have one patronage, one person who is the patron, he brings all the money, and therefore he sits down and determines who runs for which office and who appoints. I mean, Kayode came close to becoming a member of the House. So he knows how that system works. And I think for me, that's the biggest thing, really, organizing properly and taking on existing structures and establishment.
By the way, I agree with you.
Well, I I cannot disagree with Kadaria's position, but I have a caveat there. First, let me say this before people misquote me, because one of the anyway, before I'll be as clear. I'll be as clear as I can. You know, it's first, I'm a Democrat in action. My life epitomizes democracy. I've got marks to show on my body as a sign of my commitment to the democratic process. I remain not as rich as my contemporary because of my commitment to democracy. And I believe solely, the reality is warped democracy is not fit for Africa, especially for Nigeria. It is not fit for us. Till our Commonwealth and escape justice is not a democracy that is fit for our system.
But that itself is not democracy, though.
But that's why I call it warped. We are very selective. The democracy we operate has tribalized corruption. Whereas in reality, corruption has no tribe. It has tribalized poverty. Whereas poverty does not have a tribe. The hunger that feeds the man in Sokoto is the same hunger that is attacking the man in Gombe or Lagos. You know? And so we need to be very realistic that I, personally, and this is my personal opinion, and I hope it does not happen, I pray that a Sankara situation would happen in this country in such a way. I pray, I put a caveat. I hope it's not going to happen. You know, we're having academic conversations, aren't we? And in academics, you have to explore all possibilities. You look at what is happening now. And Obama said something. He said, Africa needs strong institutions, not a strong man. And you agree with that we need strong institutions. But it's so sad that in our own society, we quote that strong institutions when it favors a man from our tribe. Let me give you a very practical example. When the clown that we call the Senate president was, and it's a free, you said I'm free to speak. So when the character that you call the Senate president was busy stifling opposition voices on the floor of the Senate, shutting people down on the floor of the Senate, our Democrats did not remember the need to protect our institutions. When the executive, and they have a lot of faults, right, start misbehaving, then we remember protecting our institutions. So we need to actually detribalize our democratic process. Once we detribalize it, it will work for us. And we had a conversation, and I was talking about young people joining political parties, and I'm glad Kadaria mentioned we need to join political parties en masse. But we also need to manage our expectations. That when you go into a process, recognize that there is a rule that does not favor you, learn to play and outsmart that rules, and then you're able to get what you want. Well, our democracy has a problem. I don't think this is the type of democracy Abiola died for, and a lot of young people died for on the street. We need to redefine our democracy to be fit for purpose for Africa.
The conversation a little bit outside of where we are so that we can get on. A lot of statistics have been reeled out by policymakers and politicians from this place. One that is pertinent is the population of young people under the age of 25. How many they are in comparison to the population itself. I do not want to use figures because I've lost it in my head. But here is my idea around it, that then the most important plan of this country should actually be an investment in education and youth and getting them empowered and all of that. And I totally agree with Kadaria on how we need to get off Twitter and Facebook and actually join those parties and take over the machinery of those parties in order to be able to have a big say outside of just having a PVC to vote, but actually to be voted for. How do we plan for 20, 30 years in the phase of youth unemployment? In the you went to see Nnamdi Kanu. His followers were young people. Boko Haram's followers were young people. OPC's followers were young people, led by older people. And the Besu were young people. Everybody, you know, and we have, I remember going to Liberia to do some work for the AU. And one of the things that we discovered in that space was that at the time I went there, you couldn't find anybody from the age of 20 to 40 who had a university education because of the experience. Say that again? Because of the experience that they had had in the last few years. They had been at war. In fact, they did a census asking young people what they wanted to be in future. And 75% of the kids in that country at that time wanted to be Rambo because the heroes of their community for a long period of time had been Rambo, young generals who had been, and there's a possibility that if we took such a census, maybe in the Niger Delta, you could find young people who also wanted to be Rambo. And so they took measures to try and correct that. I don't exactly know what they did, but this is staring us in the face. Where I've never seen I've been in this city twice, but everywhere I've gone, I've seen young children who should be in school carrying bowls and begging for money. And I was telling my friend who's from Kaduna over the phone to say, your people like to beg. He said, no, that's not true. That these are Almanjiris. And for the first time, I actually understand what that means. And so what are we doing? What can we do in moving Nigeria forward to put young people in the mainstream of industry? I can assure you, I'm convinced that the next set of multi-billionaires will be internet billionaires. We've seen Linda Ikeji use gossip to become a multi-millionaire. And young people, and I'm a fan of ours, and young people are trading those gossips and abuse and not doing anything with it and still being poor. They are sending SMSs to borrow airtime so that they can argue online. What can we do to harness all of this into a future greatness of our country?
Okay, so there are two other places I went to recently, not too long ago. One was evidence abounds of essentially how the hopelessness and lack of employment for young people has actually actively fueled the conflict, the Boko Haram conflict. Lake Chad, basically climate change caused problems with Lake Chad, and it's sort of diminished by something like 90%. At its height, it was employing something like, or providing a living for something like 30 million people. You can imagine not having anything to do. The tragedy of what happened in the Northeast is that it was predicted. A lot of experts warned about it, wrote about it, talked and talked and talked. And yet, we didn't take any mitigation measures. We didn't sit down to think, how do we retool the skills of these people who normally would maybe make a living from fishing and all the other sort of things associated with the Lake Chad. And I remember when we were growing up, there were technical colleges. I don't hear about them anymore, where people who basically were very good with their hands went in to do vocational training. So you had young men coming out doing really good carpentry, really good electrical works. At the moment, we bring a lot of those experts when we have buildings from places like Cotonou, because our people can't do things as simple as laying tiles. And so, for me, like we discussed in the earlier panel, there is a real need to sort of start giving our people skills. And I think it should be the whole gamut. So we're looking at sort of the high end, which is the technology, so that those that have the smarts, those that have the ability, can focus on the knowledge economy. But it doesn't mean that the other things that are important to living should also be ignored. So we have to also train our carpenters, we have to train our tilers, our builders, that sort of thing. And I think those are perhaps the kind of interventions that need to happen when it comes to young people. But another important thing actually is around nutrition and poverty. I think government needs to start doing something about actually providing food for the most vulnerable in our societies. It is estimated that something like 2.5 million children at the moment are malnourished. The problem is that between the ages of 1 and 5, there are certain nutrients you need for your brain to grow. If you get to the age of 5 and you manage to survive, but you're not getting those nutrients, then there's a limit to your learning, essentially. You will grow up, but there are many things that you cannot do, that you cannot comprehend. These are real issues, and these are urgent issues. And we don't seem to be treating them with the urgency that they deserve.
I'm amazed that Linda Ekeji is your. Is that?
She's found a niche,
yeah,
and she's exploited to her own good.
Good. Okay, that's exactly what is wrong with Nigeria.
Exactly what she's doing, and not getting anything out of it.
Okay, well, we can agree to disagree on that, but let me quickly say that there are amazing young people in Nigeria. Not Linda Ekeji. The young man who has been oppressed by the system in the village decided to get 1,000 naira, get a recharge card, and start selling by the roadside, make a living, empower to lift up our country. The young men and women in the creative industry that made Nollywood the second largest industry in a film industry in the world are the kind of people we should be looking at. How did it work for them? Why did it work for them? The young men and women, you see, there are so many young people that are unspoken for by those of us who have the opportunity to, go online and go on the internet. But if you take a trip outside this, if you go out now and you turn left, there is a restaurant here, and I observed it this morning. And I have about 10 women just sitting by the roadside, and about 6 had children with them. That should be the target. The target of the one that has not passed through a college or the tertiary. When we catch them young from that age, then half of the problem is solved. That's what we are not getting right. And another thing that pains me in this country is that it takes a foreigner to identify opportunity in Nigeria. When you're on the flight, you see a lot of Chinese, you see a lot of Europeans coming in, and they see opportunity in our land. And they recognize that we have a population, where there's a population, the market is there. And they break through. So we need to ask ourselves those questions. Why is it that foreigners break through within our society and we are unable to, and they recognize our creativity? And leaders can't make it possible for our own people to tap into those opportunities and make life better for themselves. Then another one I really also want to point out, and I think this is by the way, because we talked about Northeast, and we're in the Northeast. When I went to Maiduguri at the height of Bogwa, Northwest, sorry. We're in the North, let me use North. But when I went to Maiduguri, and it shocked me that Maiduguri, Borno State is what you would call a frontline state, bordering 3 countries. And countries around the world would have taken advantage as a major area where they would invest on, and it will, but you just go there. We did not tap into that opportunity, and there are places around all over Nigeria. In my state of birth, Lagos State, the elite felt it was better to go and build a co-Atlantic city and not recognize the importance of linking Ayobo to Benin Republic and create an international hub to expand the opportunity within that local poor community and raise poor people from poor to a middle class. They were more concerned about creating Atlantic City in Lagos. And where you create more rich people amongst yourself, when the poor man has nothing to eat, they go and eat those people out there. So we need to change our orientation. One of the conversations I had with a friend who is a governor was, okay, you have 3 lanes here, you have 3 lanes there in the capital city. What are you doing in the interlands? And he's not a governor from the north. Because until we recognize that my mother in Ikare, who is a cocoa farmer, is more concerned about how to move our product from the farm to a marketplace, which is what the conversation we're having in the morning, we are not going to make any progress. So those are the kind of young people I am talking about. For the young people who have gone into, who have broken through, use online media to make a success of it, what I find out, sir, is that they have actually come to be the new oppressors and mutate and take onto the character of the oppressors we are trying to get rid in our country. And that is not what we want.
Thank you. I think that there's a lot of problem with citizenship also. I get stopped by young people here asking me to autograph my face in the booklet, and I'm like, I'm not a celebrity. Yeah, so, we all get into that, and it gets into people's head, and, But before I throw this to the eyes open, I'd like to ask both of you, are there any things we are getting right as a nation that we can build on and commend as at least this we have gotten right?
Yes. No, the reason is I don't think they're fundamental enough to make a shift. So if I'm going to be a little bit biased, for example, we're sitting in Kaduna State. We're at Kabafest. If you look at the work that the governor here is doing around even things like promoting culture and this sort of, forum, allowing people to sort of be able to come and talk and discuss and promoting literacy and all of that. And look at some of the other stuff he's doing around education, around agriculture. Then you know that, yes, there are people getting it right. The problem, which again came up in an earlier conversation, is whether these pockets of excellence are enough or whether they will eventually be swallowed up if we do not replicate them nationwide. And so the concern really is, how do you get the governor of Zamfara State? How do you get the governor of Zamfara State and transplant Nasiru El-Rufai's head into his head so that he will begin to do for Zamfara what they are doing in Kaduna? You understand what I'm saying?
I do. There's a senator on Facebook who disagrees with you, though.
Well, okay. But the point I'm making is that it's about its scalability, its impact. That's not to dismiss. I mean, I live in a place in Lagos where, by and large, Lagos is sort of ahead of, the rest of Nigeria in terms of many indices. But we're beginning to get the people of Lagos that are not totally and completely happy with the progress Lagos is making. Because they will tell you the only reason Lagos is being celebrated is a question of, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And that if you begin to scratch the surface of what is going on in Lagos, there's a lot that is going wrong, and that they're not fully taking advantage of the things that they could take advantage of. And so, yes, things are happening. We're part of a global economy, and there's no doubt in my mind that a lot of young Nigerians in the diaspora that are also coming home are having an impact, particularly in the creative industries and in technology, right? So we have people coming in, setting up hubs and doing all sorts of things. So that is quite great. The question now is, how do we build on that? How do we scale it up? How do we also make sure that we're not creating another class and that leaves another, so there's a whole generation there. How do we make sure those people building technologies are not also now leaving behind the 6 million Almajiris that are roaming our streets? And how do we make sure those Almajiris also have a bright future? That's really the big question.
Yeah, I think we've made a lot of progress. It's not enough, but I was saying to my daughter, I said, look, the first time I witnessed power failure in the country, I said, look, there was a time in Nigeria where we had uninterrupted power supply. They used to call it ECN. And the first time I witnessed power failure was after Festac 1977. I think it was around 1978, and I was shocked. It felt like the world had come to an end. And then from then, we had total darkness in the country. The progress we've made, right, we cannot feel it. It takes you being in a certain generation to notice the progress. There was a time in this country where we cannot have these conversations that we're having here. You cannot even say Abasha without going under your, And there was a time where governors would allocate vote numbers to themselves. And then PVC came. It became more difficult for them to allocate votes to them. They have to work much more harder. And now there are young, dynamic people who question authority openly, freely. They go online. The senator will be forced to answer those questions. Those are progress that are important for our country, and those are conversations that I'm happy about. There's also progress in the area of people now opening up with the advent of internet, people now opening up to wanting to listen to the other person's conversation. But I think where we need to watch ourselves is the area where the people who are fighting for us are actually fighting for us and seeing it as a privilege, seeing it as something we should be thankful for. It annoys me, and I'm sorry if I sound angry here, when a governor or a former minister or a local government chairman will be saying, I serve Nigeria. No, you did not serve Nigeria. You have entourage. You have a cook. We pay you we pay for your food. We pay for everything. And they see it as, I serve you. No, the man who is actually serving me, the patriot that I should be thankful for my existence, is that young Igbo, young Hausa, young Yoruba, young Biro man who is in Maiduguri fighting Boko Haram. Who we don't pay. So we need to identify who the patriots are. And finally, before you cut me off, the idea, because I saw when I was watching the Yaradua movie, fantastic movie, I was trying to just hold myself from yanking the whole stuff. Because I was seeing the same people who created the problem trying to profess solution to our problem. We need to find new people to actually resolve the crisis created by these same elements who are part of the problem. What is a man who benefited billions from oil block trying to say, oh yeah, take a token from what we gave to you? So we need to start opening our eyes. Young people need to read. You need to read the history of these people to be able to stop doing selfie with them and making them the heroes you talk about.
Thank you. So thank you. We've got less than 10 minutes more. I'm going to take 3 questions, and I'm going to try as much as possible to take questions from people that I've not seen talk. And I've been at the back, so I know the people. I am not going to take your question. I've seen you talk. I know you, so I'm not going to take your question. Yeah. Who are the people at the back that have not spoken? Tony. Okay, I'll take you. I'll take Timmy. No, I won't take you. I won't take you. Okay, I'll take you. So how many people? We had 3 people. So let's ask the questions. Let's ask the question very, succinctly and direct to the point. So yeah, please give the mic to the man yeah, that's man, yeah.
Yeah, good evening. You are talking about moving Nigerian forward. Yeah, it's an interesting. But I think the problem is first in our country, Nigerian. It's an open secret. It is in our coat of arms. Motto, the motto of our country. Yeah. The motto of our...
Excuse, please let him talk.
Yeah. Unity, faith, peace, progress. You will never be united when you are not preaching faith. I can see people like you are saying you are talking about tribalism. Because I'm in Kaduna Best, I wrote my JAM and I applied for Unilag, sorry. So I can't get admission because of tribalism. This is the problem. Yeah, it happens.
No. Please allow him to say.
Yeah.
Please allow him to say.
Yeah. And you are tribalism.
Excuse me, please allow him to say. This is his narrative, and let him give it.
Yeah. This issue of tribalism is happening. So we all work to work in harmony in order to stand for what is right for our country and what is unfair and speak of what is unfair for our country. You are talking about youth people. So you are not talking about rural area.
Are you asking a question?
Yeah.
This
is the question I would like to answer.
Yes, please.
Yeah, in my 3-day vacation, I visit several rural areas. I see orphans, widows. So the government needs to involve these people because the people that they want Nigeria to move forward, how...
Can you give the...
Hi. Very great question. Very great panel. I learned quite a lot. So I have 2 questions. The first one is, do you guys think that the state plays too much of a role in the life of an average Nigerian? We talk about them, we think about them, we make jokes about them. We're constantly, there seems to be like a countrywide obsession with our leaders, the people who lead us, and the state. If you go to I tell this joke all the time. If you see 2 Nigerians sitting somewhere, the most likely thing they're discussing is the state. Do you think that when we're thinking about moving Nigeria forward, second question, what is the role of private enterprise? I run a business. I think that there are quite a lot of young people running businesses across the country. What is their role, right? How can we make private enterprise, young people running businesses, the forefront? How can we change the conversation from state, more to businesses and private enterprise?
Thank you. Let's take this third one.
Good evening to you all. My name is Osman Sanusi. I have 2 questions to 2 of you. My first question is, in regard to what you have just said now, the democracy problem and what so many in line with what you said. Are you seeing that democracy is rightful for us to get a way forward in Nigeria? If yes, another question again. Are you seeing that by looking at the problem that is militating the National Assembly, are you seeing that we should operate both 2 chambers, or is there any way to see that we cancel one and go with one so that we can save our economy?
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's important to answer the concerns of the young, actually on your side. I've been talking about rural people, the need to listen to the man on the street, the need to listen to the underrepresented. So that question, about your jam stuff, I don't have any answer to that because I don't have the details, your score or whatsoever. But it does exist, you know, that, yeah. So on the role of the state, I think this is one of the most important questions. I think, and I'm not going to be popular with what I'm going to say. As a people, we are also as guilty as our leaders. The leaders did not emerge from Jupiter. They are citizens of Nigeria. 3 times I've had opportunities to serve in a government. And the fear of not accepting the appointment is not because I could not do the job, but because I've got so many people looking up to me that if I get into the office, how to satisfy their needs without compromising my principle will be a major challenge for me. The rental system in our society makes the citizen complicit in our problem. As soon as you become a senator, there is a queue of 150 waiting to get a share of the national cake. I don't know if you all know Senator Ojudu. Baba Ojudu, I can say this because it's not, he will stop being my friend. I went to Ekiti State, he was then a senator. And I saw a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in Nicaragua taking bags of rice from the trailer by himself. So I asked him, I said, what's your business with this? He said, look, if I don't do this, I'm not going to get reelected. So we need to know that we are also contributors. Then another question I want to raise, how many people genuinely pay tax in Nigeria? You know, how many people in the UK, I pay for everything and I get, but I know I'm going to get the result. If I fall ill, the NHS will take ability. It's not a one-way. So the emphasis on the state is there, but we also need to look at ourselves. Lastly, how come when we go going to London is too far? How come when Nigerians go to Benin Republic, they obey the rules and regulations of the people of Benin? Having the conversation about the ruling elite, we need to start having conversations about ourselves. A very good example is that man who, in the middle of crisis in Jos, a Muslim, decided to open his doors for Christians as a safe haven. Those are the kind of examples we need to start putting forward.
Yes, on the question of the role of the state, actually, we talk and talk and talk, I believe, about the state because it is almost non-existent in many ways. If you travel outside our capital cities, the minute you move out of a lot of the states, obviously I can't say all the states, but a lot of the states, the minute you move out of the rural area, out of the main city, you find that there's very little state presence. I remember traveling around Taraba, and I left Jalingo. And I got to a place called Zim. I don't know if anybody knows Zim. And in that state, I was told, first of all, they had a police station and they burnt it down. And the person who administers the law in Zim now is apparently the guy who runs the Dodo, which is the masquerade. And so essentially, it's almost, we're almost in a twilight zone in Nigeria. It's really weird because you have our big cities like Abuja and Lagos. And if you are living in those places, you can be forgiving for actually thinking everything is right with this country. And then you move out and you realize state resources have been hijacked for the cities. And our people are still struggling with the most basic of things. They don't have drinking water. They don't have power. They don't have schools. There are still children who are going to school under trees. in this day and age. And so I think part of our obsession is the recognition that we have that the Nigerian state is supposed to provide an enabling environment, at the very least, security, so that people can get on with their life. In my state, Zamfara, until recently, 60% of Zamfara was in the hands of rustlers and bandits. Now, how can you not talk about the state under those set of circumstances? Because while as a citizen, you are able to do your borehole and provide water, and maybe put a little gate man to open the state, you're not equipped to deal with men coming at you with AK-47s. So there's that reason, because we're talking about how we are so obsessed. And I am a little bit of a socialist in leaning. So, capital and private sector and all of that. I actually think you have to have a balance because, like I said, the private sector can be very roguish in their behavior if they are not controlled. And we've seen the impact of widening gap between the rich and the poor, even in the biggest stages in the world. In the globalization meltdown we had a few years ago, and all of that was as a result of the rich getting richer and people being left behind. Trump is a direct beneficiary of that thing in America, where a certain part of rural white America was forgotten, and people, did not take into account the fact that they were suffering. So I don't believe that, capital and private capital is the answer to everything. I believe in achieving a balance. I believe in the state providing the enabling environment. I believe in the state building institutions that are strong so they can regulate also all of these things. I don't believe in lack of regulation. So that's really my question on that.
Thank you so much. We can't take any more questions. Our time has run out. But thank you so much for coming to this talk.
Another big round of applause for this amazing panel. And there you have it. We are done with the panels now. Please stand for your group photo. I'm going to go out there.